When the Crusaders reached Antioch, they believed they had finally arrived at the threshold of the Holy Land. What stood before them, however, was not a city meant to be taken, but a fortress built to endure eternity. Antioch's walls stretched for miles, climbing mountains and enclosing valleys. Towers crowned every ridge. Above them all rose the citadel on Mount Silpius, watching the Crusader camp like an unblinking eye. No army had taken the city by direct assault, and the Crusaders quickly realized they never would. So they chose siege. They spread across the fertile plains, cutting roads, seizing villages, and tightening their grip around the city. At first, hope ran high. Antioch lay before them, and the land was green. Spirits rose. Men believed it was only a matter of time, but time became their enemy. Weeks passed, then months. Food grew scarce. Foraging parties rode farther and returned with less. Seljuk relief armies harassed them constantly, striking at isolated groups and vanishing into the hills. Hunger crept back into the camp, followed by sickness, cold, and despair. Inside Antioch, Yaghi prepared relentlessly. The gates were reinforced. Archers manned every tower. Pitch boiled above the walls. The population was kept under watch as fear of betrayal spread through the city. Antioch endured, but uneasily. Outside the walls, unity collapsed. The Crusader leaders quarreled openly. Bohemond demanded Antioch for himself if the city fell. Raymond of Toulouse resisted, accusing him of ambition over faith. Godfrey tried to maintain order, but suspicion poisoned every council meeting. Men whispered that the crusade was breaking apart. Then came disaster. A massive Muslim relief army approached Antioch, threatening to trap the Crusaders between the city and annihilation. Starving and desperate, many believed the crusade was finished. But in the darkness, a secret changed everything. Bohemond made contact with Firuz, a guard inside Antioch, a man resentful, frightened, and willing to betray the city. A plan was formed in silence. If Antioch could not be starved into surrender, it would be opened from within. On the night of June 2nd, 1098, a small band of Crusaders climbed the walls under cover of darkness. Firuz turned a blind eye. Gates were opened, and before dawn, the Crusaders poured into Antioch. What followed was chaos. Street fighting erupted across the city. The defenders were overwhelmed. Yaghi fled, only to be captured and killed outside the walls. Antioch, after 8 months of suffering, had fallen. But victory lasted only hours. Before the Crusaders could even celebrate, a new Muslim army arrived, larger than any before. The Crusaders, now inside Antioch, became the besieged themselves. Starving, exhausted, and trapped behind the same walls they had just conquered, morale collapsed entirely. Men spoke of abandoning the crusade. Some tried to flee. Faith seemed lost. Then, in the depths of despair, hope returned in an unexpected form. A peasant claimed to have discovered the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side, buried beneath the city. Whether miracle or illusion, it transformed the army. Fear turned into belief. Desperation turned into resolve. On June 28, 1098, the Crusaders marched out to face the besieging army. Against all odds, they charged. Driven by faith, fury, and the belief that God marched with them, the Crusaders shattered the enemy lines. The relief army broke and fled. Antioch was secured. The impossible had happened. The city that nearly destroyed the crusade had instead forged it into something harder and far more dangerous. Antioch became the first Crusader state, and the road to Jerusalem lay open at last. But the cost was unbearable. Thousands lay dead. Faith had been tested to its limit, and the men who marched south were no longer pilgrims. They were survivors of a crucible. Antioch had not merely fallen, it had changed the crusade forever. Antioch had fallen, but the victory had barely settled when the warning horns sounded. From the east, dust rose on the horizon, and with it came the armies of Kerbogha of Mosul. The Crusaders did not have time to celebrate. They did not even have time to rest. Within days, the same walls they had fought so desperately to breach now sealed them inside. Antioch became a trap. Kerbogha moved quickly and with confidence. His forces encircled the city, cutting off every road, every supply line, every hope of escape. The siege had turned inside out. Inside the walls, conditions collapsed almost immediately. Food vanished. Disease spread. Men who had survived months of siege now broke under its weight in days. Now trapped inside Antioch, surrounded by Kerbogha's approaching army, many Crusaders began to believe the journey would end here. The city they had fought so hard to take had become a prison. Food vanished. Disease spread. Hope collapsed. Each day, the sound of enemy drums echoed beyond the walls, a reminder that escape was impossible. Men whispered of surrender. Others planned to flee under cover of darkness. The army that had crossed continents now stood on the edge of breaking. Inside Antioch, victory felt distant. Survival felt uncertain. Despair hardened into resolve. Men who could barely lift their swords now spoke of marching out to face Kerbogha's army, not to survive, but to win. On June 28, 1098, the gates of Antioch opened. The Crusaders emerged in battle order, banners raised, chanting prayers as they marched onto the plain. Kerbogha watched from the hills, certain that hunger and exhaustion would finish what his siege had begun. But his army was not as united as it appeared. As the battle unfolded, hesitation spread through his ranks. Allied contingents delayed. Some withdrew, others never fully engaged. The Crusaders did not stop. Driven by belief, desperation, and the certainty that retreat meant death, they charged. Against expectation and against numbers, Kerbogha's lines broke. The Seljuk army collapsed into retreat. What was meant to be the Crusade's destruction became its greatest victory. Antioch was secured, not by strategy alone, not by strength alone, but by the simple truth that the Crusaders had reached a point where defeat was no longer an option. And as the dust settled on the battlefield, one reality became clear. Jerusalem still lay far to the south, and the hardest choices of the crusade were yet to come. Antioch was finally theirs. The banners of the cross flew above the walls. The enemy had been driven out, and for a brief moment, victory tasted sweet. But inside the city, unity died almost immediately. The leaders turned on one another. Bohemond claimed Antioch as his reward. Raymond of Toulouse refused, accusing him of ambition over faith. Godfrey tried to hold the crusade together, but suspicion poisoned every council. What should have been celebration became argument. What should have been rest became tension. The army watched as their commanders quarreled, each man pulling in a different direction. Outside the walls, the land had been stripped bare. Food was scarce, discipline weakened, and desperation returned, quietly, dangerously. Antioch had been won, but the crusade itself was beginning to fracture. And as the leaders argued over power and promises, a darker chapter waited ahead. Hunger, brutality, and a city whose name would stain the crusade forever. What comes after Antioch will shock even those who believed God was on their side. If you want to see what happens next, like this video and subscribe, because the road to Jerusalem is about to descend into darkness.